Hello everybody and welcome back to Learn Hittite, and today we're going to be taking a look at Phrygian language. So who were the Phrygians? Well, we're back in Anatolia, and similar to the Hittites, the Phrygians were an Indo-European speaking group who migrated into Anatolia and quite frankly took a liking to the place. Herodotus states that the Phrygians are said to have crossed into Anatolia from Thrace and Macedonia. Interestingly, and later on we'll find out importantly, Herodotus also links the Phrygians with the Armenians. We also get given the information from Herodotus that the Phrygians used to be called the Phryges. Pokorny noted that Phryges likely derived from a Proto-Indo-European term meaning high or mountain. The following map presents the approximate geographical range of Phrygian inscriptions, with the darker colour indicating a higher frequency of finds. The most important Phrygian archaeological site is Gordion, about 50 miles southwest of Ankara. It is often said that Gordion was the capital city of the ancient Phrygian state, however this status is debated. Clearly, Gordion was a centre of wider regional importance, but the archaeological record hasn't actually revealed any concrete evidence of an administrative system in place in Gordion. It is possible, therefore, that Phrygia was actually a patchwork of independent entities, each probably with their own king, and Gordion being one, if not the most, influential city. The Phrygian period of Gordion ranged from about 1100 BC to about 260 years BC, according to Rose and Derbyshire in their 2011 paper. So, what does the corpus of Phrygian look like? The Phrygians are said to have adopted their alphabet between the late 9th and early 8th centuries BC from southeastern Anatolia. It was likely adopted from the Phoenician alphabet in a similar fashion to the Greeks. The exact order and timings of adoption are of course debated in the literature. The Greek and the Old Phrygian alphabets share the same core letters. New Phrygian inscriptions, on the other hand, are written in the Greek alphabet proper. The following signs in the Phrygian alphabet are often debated as of their phonetic values, so much so that it's actually difficult to list the possible interpretations. And in some cases, they might actually be variants of one another. So therefore, it's best to consider these like kind of wild cards. The following signs are also quite mysterious. The first is attested only once and may in fact be a scribal mistake. The second sign is probably a variant of B. Where does Phrygian fit into the Indo-European family? Earlier researchers considered Phrygian to be a Satem language closer to Armenian than any of the other Indo-European branches. Some poorly attested languages like Thracian have often been considered to be closely related to Phrygian, although the obvious weakness of such an argument is that you're taking a poorly attested language and trying to show a relationship with a partially attested language. So there's always going to be some weakness with these types of comparisons. More recent studies have cast doubt on the closeness of the relationship with Armenian and now see Greek as being the closest language. Although there are still some researchers who doubt the relationship with Greek and prefer the Armenian connection. Obrador-Korsak identified 32 key Phrygian features, 30 of which are shared with Greek. These included phonetic traits such as the same development of the pi second laryngeal suffix, shared morphological features like the Phrygian suffix avos, said to be similar to its Greek counterpart in that it can be used to form personal titles. Lexical similarities are also considered, for example, the Old Phrygian kenemen, meaning cavity or niche, is believed to share the same origin as the Greek kenos, meaning empty or idle. Of these 32 key features, Armenian shares 10 with Phrygian, with only one probably exclusive only to Phrygian and Armenian. Albanian shares 7. Shared innovations between Armenian and Phrygian are therefore much more limited. In 2013, linguist Anna Elizabeth Hamming has noted some possible evidence for a relationship between Armenian and Phrygian. Both languages use glides or fricatives in some positions where a stop would be predicted. And other linguists have pointed to some statements in the historical record which declare the shared origins between Phrygians and Armenians. So Phrygian is a partially attested language, which means that we still have some gaps in our knowledge regarding lexical and morphological items and things like that. However, in comparison to other languages that I've recently covered on this channel, for example, Illyrian and Elymian, we have a much better understanding of how Phrygian actually works. And because of that, in today's video, I can only really scratch the surface of Phrygian studies. Now, of course, in the video description, I'll provide a comprehensive reading list of interesting papers and books. So if any particular subject or item in today's video catches your attention and you want to take a deeper dive, you can go and find everything in those resources. So we can break the Phrygian corpus down in the following way. In total, we have about 513 inscriptions, plus 4 confirmed glosses. Now, there are some other glosses proposed, but they are of varying reliability. Nowadays, it is the custom to divide Phrygian into 3 phases: Old Phrygian, Middle Phrygian, and New Phrygian. Old Phrygian consists of 395 inscriptions, 259 of which are from Gordion, dating from the years 800 to 330 BC. It uses the Old Phrygian alphabet, and the inscriptions are preserved and found across the breadth of Anatolia. We have a wide variety of inscription type, and the inscriptions are on varying writing materials, such as stone, pottery, metal, and wood. And with most of the old inscriptions, they have a known archaeological context. Middle Phrygian is a little bit more of a grey area. We only have one concrete Middle Phrygian inscription, plus some possible graffiti, dating from the 4th or 3rd centuries BC. The phraseology of Middle Phrygian is actually more similar to Old Phrygian, but possesses phonetic features of New Phrygian. For New Phrygian, we have 117 inscriptions, approximately, dating from the late 1st and 3rd centuries AD. These use the Greek alphabet proper, but are strictly limited to funerary inscriptions in stone. Many of the inscriptions also only survive via copies. Sometimes we have multiple copies, but nevertheless only copies. Curiously, the inscriptions are also absent from major cities and occur more in towns and rural settings. Maybe we can conclude from this that during the New Phrygian period, in the larger cities and urban centres, Phrygian wasn't used, and the use of Phrygian was restricted more to a rural, smaller town type setting. So, before we take a look at some Phrygian inscriptions, let's get briefly acquainted with what we know about Phrygian grammar. Firstly, Phrygian word order is subject-object-verb, and here, as we can see, is a condensed version of the Phrygian case endings for reference. We can clearly notice the similarities with the Proto-Indo-European case system. We have 4 cases, and the partially attested nature of Phrygian becomes apparent, because here there are some big gaps in our knowledge, particularly A-stem plurals in Old Phrygian amongst others. It's also possible that Phrygian had a vocative case, and we simply just don't see it because of the nature of the preserved texts. Phrygian had 3 genders and no dual has been observed. Verbal morphology is even more problematic due to the monumental nature of Phrygian texts. Most verb forms attested are in the 3rd person, and there is a lot of discussion regarding the nature of the other persons in Phrygian. It is likely, however, that Phrygian maintained 3 tenses, 2 voices and 4 moods. However, some of these are only very partially attested. Phrygian was in contact with a number of other languages, resulting in various word borrowings going to and from Phrygian. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Greek shows the most contact and two-way influence, followed by the Anatolian languages. There is some evidence that some personal names were borrowed from Persian, and perhaps the word for bread or food was borrowed from Assyrian. There is also some evidence for language contact between Phrygian, Elamite, Galatian and Latin, although the evidence is limited. So this very beautiful stone inscription was found on a rock-cut facade of the Midas monument, and the inscription itself was found running along the pediment, and it's dated to the 6th century BC. 7 words can be identified in the inscription, and the translation into English is as follows. Attes, the son of Archias, the Akananogavos, made it for Midas, the leader and the king. So let's break it down one word at a time. We have Attes here, which is in the nominative singular, and it's a personal name, probably derived from the Anatolian atta, meaning father. We have Archiaveus, nominative singular patronymic. Akananogavos, nominative singular, the meaning of which is unclear. It's possibly a patronymic or a title. Some linguists have even speculated that it may be an ethnonym derived from Akanan. Here we have Midai, singular dative, a personal name possibly derived from Hittite. Lavagtai, singular dative meaning leader of people, likely related to the Doric Lagetas, meaning the same thing. Vanaktai, dative singular meaning king, the origin of which is disputed. Perhaps it's a loan from Greek or even Anatolian. And finally, as we would expect, we have our verb in the final position. Third person singular active aorist, meaning to do or to put, probably derived from Proto-Indo-European. This inscription is quite representative of an Old Phrygian inscription. More or less we understand the meaning of it, however there are a lot of question marks, particularly regarding the origin and etymology of some personal names. So for comparison we have a new Phrygian inscription. This was copied in or before 1934, and unfortunately, like many other Phrygian inscriptions, the stone on which the inscription was made has been lost. Obviously this is problematic because we can't make any further examination of the stone, of the markings, which sometimes can reveal useful additional information regarding the text. But we have what we have, and this inscription would translate as, "Whoever does harm to this tomb, let him become accursed by Zeus, and let Bas not give bread to him." I chose this particular inscription because this style of curse is reasonably common amongst Phrygian inscriptions. Now we're going to focus on the final clause, but just out of interest, here is the word for Zeus. Here we have the word for tomb. And this is a verb meaning to become. Let's focus on this final clause. We'll work backwards. Here we have bekos. This is in the nominative or accusative singular. It means bread. Its origin is debated. It could possibly be a loan. However, equally, it could be derived from Proto-Indo-European. Possibly the Proto-Indo-European form meaning to warm. Here we have Bas, which is a deity name. Here we have our verb. Now, inside the literature, it's reported differently to as of whether this was a single word or two words. More recently, it has been interpreted as a single combined word, and the most probable meaning we can attribute to it is that it's a verb derived from the Proto-Indo-European verb to give. Here we have our pronoun meaning him or her. Ke is our conjunction and me is our prohibitive particle meaning not. So the loose translation here would be something like, and not to him or her Bas gives bread. Now it's quite curious to as of why so many Phrygian inscriptions are actually lost. And to be honest, I spent a little bit of time trying to research the fate of some of the stones which contain the more interesting inscriptions. But unfortunately, I haven't been able to find anything conclusive regarding their fates. One would assume that they could have just been damaged through the passage of time and, the events that took place in the universe. Perhaps somewhat more hopefully, they might exist somewhere in some private collections, which means at some point in the future, academics and linguists might get another opportunity to take a closer examination of these inscriptions. And one optimistic thing for the future is that we still find new Phrygian inscriptions, which means some of the gaps that we have in our knowledge might not be gaps for much longer. Well, that's all from me for today. It truly was an honour and a privilege to have these few moments to speak to you about Phrygian. I hope you found this video somewhat informative and entertaining. If you find this sort of content enjoyable, please drop me a like and a subscribe. I'll be back very shortly with another interesting video. You've been watching Learn Hittite, and goodbye for now.